Hi there, and welcome to the HDFS Career Podcast. My name is Dr. Lori Bullock, and I'm an assistant professor in human development and family studies at MSU. I teach several courses in the department, and one of them is HDFS 270, which introduces students to this major and to the field of family science. Quite often, students who are new to our major are not quite sure of the career options they have with a degree in human development and family studies. Some students know exactly what they want to do, and some students aren't quite sure and can sometimes feel overwhelmed. And there are other students who are in our major but plan to pursue a career in the healthcare field. These would be students who know that they want to be nurses or doctors or child life specialists, occupational therapists, and so on. The purpose of this podcast is to bring professionals on from many different areas. Each episode, I invite a professional from the community who has a background in HDFS or one that is similar to HDFS. I'm so excited you joined the podcast, and I hope today's episode will be helpful to you as you consider your career options. Hello, HDFS students and colleagues. I have a great guest on the podcast for you today, and I can't wait for you to meet her. Her name is Dr. Sarah Douglas, and she's an associate professor here in HDFS with a focus on early childhood and developmental disabilities. Dr. Douglas began her work with children with disabilities as a special education teacher. She obtained a PhD in special education from Penn State University in 2011 with an emphasis on augmentative and alternative communication. She remained as faculty at Penn State until 2014, where she taught courses on inclusive special education, severe disabilities, English language learners with special needs, assistive technology, and autism. She joined the faculty at MSU in 2014 and started the RADD lab, where she conducts research to support children with disabilities, their families, and educational teams. Her research focuses on three distinct areas: paraeducator support for students with disabilities, communication partner training to support children who use augmentative and alternative communication, and sensor technologies to measure social interactions of children with disabilities. She has current funding through the U.S. Department of Education to create, test, and revise online training programs for paraeducators and supervising teachers who support children with complex communication needs. Dr. Douglas, thank you so much for joining the podcast today and sharing your experiences. I can't wait for our students to learn from you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So my first question is, can you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you focus on?
Yeah, so as explained in my bio, my background coming into this field was really as an educator. And so as a teacher, I noticed some things that I found challenging in my own classroom, one of which was working with children who have complex communication needs and helping teach them different strategies to communicate using augmentative and alternative communication. So that's kind of explains one area of my research. The other is learning to work with paraeducators. As a teacher, I wasn't really trained or prepared to work with that population, yet I had many paraeducators that I was expected to work with and give them support, supervision, training. And I wasn't really clear how to do that. And so I kind of had to learn as I went. And then I'm also just so intrigued by the different soft skills that children need when they leave school to be successful in adulthood. And one of those skills is really just that social communication. And so that sensor work sort of represents that piece. It's not enough to get a high school diploma. It's not really even enough to get a college degree. If you don't know how to work and be around other people and interact with them in positive ways, you're going to really struggle to be successful in your adulthood. So I think those are things that I care a lot about. And the most natural place to sort of prepare for that is preschool. That's really the first introduction to other children, unless, inside of your home with your own siblings, but that's kind of a different experience. Learning to share and learning to interact and learning to negotiate, all of those things really start in the preschool setting. So that's kind of why I got interested in that. So I sort of took the things as a teacher that were challenging and frustrating to me and turned that into, I guess, my career as a researcher. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that is exciting because I've volunteered in my children's classrooms, but when they were younger, they're adults now. And so many of the paraeducators were parents
Yeah.
working in the classrooms, right? Is that still the case?
Yeah, that definitely happens. I mean, I think it's common because the schedule is the same. It's definitely more dominated by females. Um, and what happens as a new teacher is you're often entering, and all the paraeducators that you're working with are much older than you. Many of them were like my mom's age. And that felt very strange to give them directions. And honestly, some of them had more experience in a classroom than I did. And so, how do I act like I know what's going on and I'm supposed to be the boss? It was a very unusual situation. And that's one of the things I went to my mentors a lot about. I want to do this well, and I want them to respect me, and I want, to respect them. How can I do that? When I'm having these certain feelings. And I don't think my paraeducators ever made me feel that way. They were always like, hey, this is your classroom. You just need to tell us what you want done. And I had really, really good paraeducators. I think that's one thing that was really helpful. I mean, I definitely in my long-term career in education, I had some that really challenged me, but those first experiences were pretty positive, and they really helped me understand my role as a teacher as well. So, and that even started in when I was student teaching. One of the placements that I was in, the paraeducators were like, nope, this classroom's getting turned over to you. You're the boss. You tell us what to do. And, they kind of guided me. And it was fun because I got actually to return to that school. And some of those paraeducators were like the class next to me. And so it was kind of fun to be back with them and recognize the role they had in shaping me into the teacher that I became.
Yeah, that's awesome because it sounds to me like through that work you have improved the ways that children can be supported because you've improved training the teachers, but also training the paraeducators and how to work together. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the hope, right? That whatever I do will somehow make a difference in the lives of the people that I'm trying to influence. But I also understand that the reality is sometimes these changes take a long time to trickle down, and that there is a research to practice gap. And so I'm mindful that sometimes, and I have to be okay with this, I have to remind myself, sometimes I'm only impacting those that are directly in my research project, right? And if those are the only lives I'm impacting, like it's still those lives. And a lot of my research is done with really small numbers of participants. And so I have to say to myself, if it's only this family that we impact for this project, okay. But hopefully this work will also mean that other families get supported. And I'm starting to see that in my career now, which is quite rewarding. But also it takes a lot, there's a lot less control over the quality or how it's done, or, so there's those drawbacks. But I do feel like now some of the work that I did early in my career is finally getting to even more families, even more children, even more classrooms. And that's rewarding to see.
I could see that. And I could also see where, once you do make a difference with a family, they meet other families. And
Mhm.
so then that can spread. And so
Yeah.
that does sound really rewarding.
Yeah. It's been
Um,
good.
yeah. And I didn't think about this question earlier, and I don't know why, but can you explain a little bit about augmentative technologies
Sure.
and,
Sure.
those terms?
Yeah, so many children with disabilities, especially those with like more significant support needs, they struggle with verbal communication. So to actually speak to meet their needs, they might have some vocalizations, they might occasionally be able to produce a word, but it's inconsistent or unclear. Definitely difficult for like non-familiar partners to understand. And so that's where augmentative and alternative communication comes in. And that's just a broad term to talk about all the different ways in which we communicate that are not speech. So it could even include things like gestures, things more formal like sign language, or things that are required, such as picture symbols or communication apps on an iPad, or even a dedicated computerized system that's accessed. And the most common way that it's accessed is what we call direct selection, and that's usually with a finger, but it could also be with like a toe with a head pointer, like maybe they're wearing a mechanism around their head with a pointer coming off, depending on the motor challenges the person experiences. And then sometimes if the motor challenges are really significant, you think of people who have like acquired disabilities like ALS, where their body no longer works. They might only have the movement of their eyes. Sometimes you can even use technologies to gaze to something, or like switches where you hit things with your head to kind of navigate through the choices in your communication system. I think the main thing I've learned about AAC is, a lot of families are very hesitant to use it with small children, but speech is always going to be the easiest route if it's available. Like no child is going to choose to use a more complex system if they're able to do it in a less complex way. And so I think, for families who are kind of hesitant to do this, it's a way to expose your child to language. It's a way to help build skills. And all the time that we're using AAC, we're still speaking. So they're still getting those models, even if they're also learning how to use a communication system. And I know for lots of children, like with autism or other disabilities where cognitively and, neurology is just different for them, they say it takes the pressure off that there's some anxiety around communicating, and this allows them to communicate and at least feel like they have a tool to use if their speech is not supporting them at that time. So.
Yeah, I just think that's so important and, such a wonderful technology. And I would think that once the parents learn to use that with their children, seems like they would start to understand that their child understands a lot more than they're able to express. And then I would think that opens up a lot of things for them.
It does, and it
Is that right?
can. I think, still it's up to the individual themselves too to sort of buy in. So there's always situations in which sometimes an individual will take like decades to really gain the skills. And it's not always clear if that's just a motivation thing, if like there's just they find a way to get their needs met more easily, or they just don't have like a huge desire to communicate or interact with the people around them. But it's always worth a try. And even if it's a long time, to come up with how to use it, I think it's, the child's gaining skills and there's still that ability to connect with people around them, which I think is so critical to kind of our quality of life. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine a challenge is like you said, it's kind of individualized depending on their needs and their abilities.
Oh, for sure. Like there are people who try to use the same system for everyone, but really they should be very personalized, and ideally no two systems would be exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Which I
like our
think
language is not exactly the same.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's a huge challenge, but
Yes.
rewarding
Yes.
when you figure it out. Awesome.
For sure. It takes a lot of professionals to sort of figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, definitely. So my next question is, as a professor in the department, I know that you wear many hats. You teach classes, you have your research, you have your lab, you mentor students and things like that. Could you tell us, like even thinking about your research lab, the RADD lab, could you kind of explain what is a typical day or week like for you working in the lab?
So we have lab meetings where all of us meet together once a week, but I also have individual meetings with each of my graduate students that are affiliated with the lab. And then we have project specific meetings. So if someone's part of a grant or part of a specific project, we'll schedule times to meet. And all of those meetings are pretty regular. Like each of my students I meet with at least every other week, but often more frequently than that, especially as they're moving into dissertation and they have more questions that come up. For each project, it kind of depends. Sometimes we're doing data collection, so there's lots of meetings, lots of things happening all at once. But other times we're working on like data analysis, so we'll give ourselves time to work on a task before we meet again. So sometimes that's like, we'll meet in 2 weeks or, something like that. So it really varies depending on each of the projects. But I would say a bulk of my time, especially this semester, because I just got 2 new research grants, is spent doing research-based activities. As a researcher, you also need to publish. This semester, I've spent a little less time working on writing tasks. I'm hoping to get back to that more in October, but just getting the 2 grants off the ground has been very time consuming. And so, I'm spending upwards of 30 plus hours a week just on research tasks. And so it's a lot, but it's also, my passion. So thankfully I enjoy the work I do. And there's a lot of varied things within the tasks. Sometimes it's listening to transcripts, sometimes it's analyzing data, sometimes it's working on recruitment materials, sometimes it's creating an intervention. So all of those feel very different, and there's like some parts that are more creative and some parts that are more analytical. So I feel like, when I need a break from one task, I can kind of switch to the other side of my brain and and work on a task that is different. When I have days where I'm just feeling like, whew, my motivation is lagging a little, I'll work on the tasks that aren't quite as cognitively demanding. And other days where I'm feeling sharp and ready to go, I work on those tasks that are, require more attention to detail. So it's fun in that way that you get to kind of tailor your own day, your own week. I usually have like broad arching goals, and I give myself kind of due dates to keep myself on task, but generally each day there's not like specific things that I have to get done. I can kind of choose the order I want to do things in, which is not true for all jobs. Yeah, it's nice that there's like an element of creativity, but also a lot of intellectualism that happens. Both of those are true, I think, in this career.
Yeah, it sounds really fulfilling. And like you said, variety just really keeps you interested, and you can meet the needs of wherever you're at, whatever your energy levels are at. And
it's
so
so
that
fun to
sounds
work with
awesome.
students too and help them learn the research process. I have undergraduate students that work with me as well as my graduate students, and seeing them, like especially senior graduate students, emerge as like researchers in their own right and really like gain those skills. And it's like, you've got this, you don't even need my help anymore. And sometimes they're like, I still think I might need, maybe I'm just there as like a security blanket, right? But other times I'm like, whew, you're ready. Like you don't even need me anymore. But it's also really fun. Like I've had many undergraduate students that have just like flourished and really shown some great leadership skills. And I think part of that is their affiliation with the lab and like taking on responsibilities in the lab. And that's super exciting to see. Like I have one that was just nominated as what is it? A Rhodes Scholar and a Mitchell Scholar and a Marshall Scholar, all of those. And I'm just like,
Wow.
what? So I get to work with some of the brightest students here at MSU. And I think that is just like, what other job lets you do that? Like,
Yeah.
and then also like take some kind of credit maybe for where they end up in the long run. Like, not that I really have much to do with him, but what if he becomes a president in the future? I could be like, he was once at the RADD lab.
Yeah.
These are pretty prestigious scholarships. So it's really fun to work with those students. And not every student is like that as they come through the lab, but just to see them make the growth and get to the next stage of their life is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Can you explain? I don't know if you can think off the top of your head, 'cause, this question just occurred to me, but an example of what a project that an undergraduate research assistant might do,
Sure.
what they might
Yeah, I'll give an example
develop.
from one of my graduate students, Atika, is working on her dissertation. So it's very common that undergrads will support dissertation. So right now we're conducting online focus groups with siblings and family members of children with autism to try to have them look at the intervention materials that we've created and give us feedback. And so we have a couple different graduate students that are working on this. Some of them are working on tasks where they're working on refining the transcription that came from those meetings. Zoom does some auto recording, but it does some funky stuff. And there's a lot of cleaning up that needs to happen. Even as we speak, we say things like, we overuse the word like, sometimes we repeat our phrases a couple of times. So they do a lot of that cleanup, but also they are taking notes at focus groups. Sometimes they're the ones collecting data, and a lot of my data is collected online. So they're actually conducting a Zoom session. They're following research protocol. There's lots of training that we have to do to prepare them for each of these roles, but they're all doing a lot of cool things. And even those that get to this point, and when we have projects that are doing this, they're like coding visual or video data and acting as inter-rater reliability coders, and like that takes a lot of dedication. So I'm so grateful for their work, and a lot of times it's as a volunteer. We get Puri grants now and then, and we have some budget from our research projects and our research grants. But a lot of times they're like, hey, I just want to be prepared to go to graduate school, or I'm really interested in this and I just want to do this as a volunteer. And to me, that's like, wow, you're really making the most of your education. So that's cool.
Yeah, and a great idea too, because it does look
Yeah.
great on a
Oh,
student's
absolutely.
application. Yeah.
And I would say almost all the student, I mean, I can't think of a student in the lab that isn't planning to go to graduate school. So usually they're on a career path. Maybe they want to be some kind of therapist, like an OT, PT, speech. They're interested in going pre-med. They're interested in going to school to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Any number of these things. Sometimes it's social work, but almost always they're like, there's going to be a next step after this, and I want some experience to kind of set me apart when I'm ready to go to graduate school, and also give me experience to decide when I get to graduate school, do I want to continue on a research track, or am I looking at a practitioner role? And I think all of those things are pretty important to find out when you're as young as possible, really. If you have a passion, like, go look at all the different opportunities and ways you might pursue that passion.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said some of those things, because we do get students who are interested in all of those areas that you mentioned. And so helping them to see that, if they kind of step outside of themselves and talk with faculty, there might be opportunities to volunteer on things like that. And sounds like they gain so much. Experiential learning is really important there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So can I ask you, what made you choose this career path you followed? We talked a little bit about the beginning, because you started out in special education, but did you always know you wanted to go special education, and then from there?
It's a little bit funny, actually. When I was younger, I really wanted to be a doctor. And I would tell my grandfather that my grandfather was a doctor, my aunt was a doctor. And I even shadowed my aunt at one point, and that did not turn out how I thought it was going to. I think she did a pap smear on someone who was, like 80. So she was like, you can watch. And I was like, I don't really think I'm interested in that. So that was not the experience. And I was like, that's what she does for her job. Like, that doesn't really seem, and she was like a family physician. So I was sort of thinking she would see sick children, or, everything she did that day. I was like, this is not what I was expecting. Right. And so my grandfather used to give me a lot of books that were about kind of healing and medical professions. And I remember there was this one book that was like called The Power to Heal, and it had like even pages where like of burn victims. And I was always very intrigued by that. It had a lot of things about disability, and so I always had that in the back of my mind. And then as I went to school and I was thinking about the career path I wanted to do, I'm like, I don't know about being a doctor. I really wanted to be a mother as well. And I felt like those two things were going to be difficult to meld together in a way that I was going to be satisfied with both. I tend to go hard at whatever I do. And it's like, it's really hard to go hard as a doctor and hard as a mom. Right. And so I decided I wanted to be a physician's assistant. I took my second biology class, and I shadowed a couple physician's assistants, and they were like, we work more hours than the doctor. And I was like, oh, no. And I hated my I hated my first biology class, but I really hated my second biology class. And I was like, I have to do how many of these? Like, this just seems like torture. So I kept going back to like, why am I wanting to go into this field? Like, I want to help people. I'm really interested in, unique circumstances and people who like kind of defy the odds, or bring like lots of questions to the table. Like, that's really what was intriguing me about and like, I wasn't interested in like the person who was coming for a routine check. Like, that wasn't, and I was like, I want the weird things. I want to know
house.
about that. Yeah. Yeah. Like, what you dream that a doctor would do, but like, they do a lot of mundane things. Right. And so I kept thinking back to my childhood, and I had interfaced a lot with children with pretty significant disabilities in elementary school. And so I was like, I think I'm going to switch my major to special education. And I ended up actually going back into that classroom that I went to as a youth when I was in elementary school. And I went during recess, and we made things like pudding and played games, and I learned about AAC for the first time. So it was really actually those very first experiences as a child that I went back to, and I was like, what is it that I love? And I'm like, I love that experience. Like, I could work with that population. I'd still need to support them in some ways medically. As a teacher, like, there's things like I did G tubes and medications and toileting, all those kinds of things. So it felt like a really good fit, and it was fun to kind of come full circle. And it was really fun for that teacher to see that I decided to become a special ed teacher, basically because she gave me the opportunity to come in her class as a peer model. So, I don't, it's pretty cool to have that happen. And I did enjoy being a teacher. I think the main reason why I went into research was I saw there was more need in the field, and I felt like this was where I was called to make the difference. And I could make a bigger difference, by going into higher education than I could by just being in one classroom. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Kind
that's
of a
great.
circuitous path, but I think most people's are. Like, usually when you start college, it's not going to be linear. There's going to be some side steps, but you get to where you need to be in the end, and everything does kind of make sense. And I don't think what's funny is I am a doctor, right? just not the doctor I thought I would be. And so that's a little bit fun too. And my grandma passed recently, but it was always fun to go and visit her. She had dementia towards the end, and whenever I'd visit her, I would, get to tell her again what my career was, and she would just go, "Oh, that is wonderful." And it was like, it's so fun to tell her that each time. It was just like a new discovery for her that her granddaughter was, a professor. Like, that just was the greatest thing to her. So, yeah, it's been a pretty good career match. It's definitely a challenging career, but I'm not upset that I went this way. So
yeah, it seems like a good fit.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it is fun to see students when they do start to realize, what feels good, what feels like a fit, something just feels right. And it's fun to see them discover that. So
yeah.
I'm sure it was rewarding for your teacher too, to know that you've gone
Oh,
this
for
route.
sure. I think it was super fun for her. And I actually got to do one of my practicums in her classroom early on. And so that was really fun. Like, of course, it's not the same students. And she was actually getting, closer to considering retirement at that point. I think about 5 years later, she retired. And so it was just very fun for her to sort of see that she had not only impacted the students that she was working with, but she kind of impacted someone's trajectory in their life by giving them a chance to experience children with disabilities. And really, she was kind of doing things that a lot of other people weren't doing. She was really trying to do what was called mainstreaming then, and bringing peers into that classroom was really not that common. But she understood the importance for her students, but I think also for us. And so I'm pretty grateful that I got those chances early on.
Yeah. You never know what difference you make in somebody's life or their career until sometimes still a lot later.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you have any advice for students who might be interested in pursuing a career in either special ed or child development, any of those areas? Do you have any advice for students?
Yeah, I think definitely go and check out the different settings in which you might work in the future. If you're thinking you want to be a special education teacher, like, go work at a summer camp for children with disabilities, or, go volunteer or work as a paraeducator in a school. Find out what that job is like, because sometimes we have kind of a rosy view of different careers. And I think that was what was so helpful for me in figuring out, did I actually want to be a medical doctor? What I thought it was going to be like wasn't really what it felt like when I was doing it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this every day. And so as I was going to school and it didn't feel like a good match, it was very easy for me to say, okay, like, I can make a change. I don't have to do what I thought I wanted to do. So I think just kind of going and experiencing different places and spaces where you could end up in the end is a really important piece to your education. And sometimes you'll be in a field or a training program that will offer those opportunities naturally. Like, when you're going to be a teacher, you don't get into teaching without going in the classroom a lot of different ways before that. But even before you go to school, like, there's ways for you to figure out if this is something you want to do. Like, take a gap year, be a para, take a gap year and, go, like, if you're interested in like child development in other contexts, go like study in another country. Like, there's lots of ways you could kind of explore. Don't think of it as, I think we try to fit young adults into these boxes where it's like, you're going to graduate from high school and then you're going to go to college and it's going to take you 4 years and you're going to leave with this degree, and that everything is so like, it's not, that's not how life works. So it's okay to give yourself the space to say, I'm not really sure what I want to do. And I'm trying to do that for my own children. It's very difficult when I think it's your own children where they're like, I don't know what I want to do. And I'm kind of like, well, maybe you should figure it out. But also, like, if it was another person's child, I'd say, that's okay. Like, give yourself the space to figure it out. So I think everyone needs that in their lives.
Yeah. And to know that there's no race. You
Right,
don't have
exactly.
to finish anything by a certain deadline. There's no race. You're not in competition with other people, even though it might feel like it.
Yep. And it doesn't matter where you start either. Like I didn't start at a 4-year university. I started at community college because I had a full ride scholarship. And I was like, look, I'm going to not pay for school for 2 years and I'm going to work. I can live at home. And then I went to university after that point, but it took me 5 years to get my undergrad. And I don't regret that at all. I think that was the right choice for me. And I think it gave me a little bit more maturity and yeah, and I didn't have some of the experiences some people have, like I never lived in a dorm, but I don't feel like I missed out. That maybe is one experience I'm cool with missing. Other people might be like, no, I really want that. And that's cool if you want that too. But I think, craft your own, make your own path, craft your own way. It doesn't have to look just the same as everyone else's. And, it doesn't, the impact that you're going to make on the world, it doesn't matter if it takes you 6 years to get there or 4 years or 10 years, right? Like hopefully it doesn't take you till you're 85, but, I think don't put so much pressure on yourself to get there quickly, because sometimes then you end up making choices that later you regret too, because you didn't have all the information or you weren't mature enough to kind of make the decisions that would give you a picture of where you wanted your future to be long-term.
Yeah, that's such a great way to look at it too. So I hope that can help students and make an impact for them. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about networking and building connections in the field? Are there like organizations and different types of professionals that you network with and connect with in your work?
So this might surprise some people, but I don't really consider myself an extrovert. If anything, I would say I'm an ambivert, meaning that sometimes I feel extroverted, but then I need like rest time where I'm more introverted. So actually the field of like being a researcher is it's a pretty good match, because you have to have a certain amount of extrovert in you to be able to recruit people and to, be with students and to teach and, all those kinds of things. But also you have to be willing to like sit in your own space and be by yourself for hours at a time. Like if you need to always talk to someone, like maybe being a researcher is not going to be your best path for that. Unless I guess you could work in a lab where you're standing alongside people and you could chat the whole time. But I think, so what I've learned about myself is I'm not amazing at networking naturally. So when I first got into academia, I had to be very intentional about it. And there's a few different strategies I've used. So as a researcher, we often go to conferences to share our research and to meet other people. And that's a natural place to network. And so kind of early in my career, and I did this some too when I was at Penn State, but definitely when I was here, I was trying to really make research connections, like people I could do research with. And so I would sort of tell myself like, okay, you need to go to this social event at this conference and you need to talk to either like specific people, like I'm looking to talk to specific people, or I need to talk to 40 people before I can allow myself to leave. Cause I'm just like, I'm done. I'm ready to not be social anymore tonight. And that's been a pretty good strategy for me. And I have met some of my very closest collaborators through conferences. The person that I have one of my recent grants with, she's not at my university. We met at a conference in Hawaii. We actually had a walk on the beach where we like ran into each other early in the morning because we were both like time zone, kind of not on Hawaii time zone. I was going on a walk early. She was going on a walk early and we ran into each other. We'd had a short conversation before and we just hit it off and we really enjoyed each other's company. We had a lot in common as far as our research, but also we just understood each other. So it was like a very natural, easy working relationship. So it's kind of funny when we talk to people, we're like, yeah, we met on a beach in Hawaii. Sounds kind of like a romance story, but it's not.
Right.
We're just researchers. So, but it's pretty cool that can happen. And yeah, we're actually going back to that same conference in January in the same location again. Nice. Like sometimes it moves around to different places, but it will be like actually in the same location. I don't remember exactly how many years it's been, but maybe like 7 or something. And so it's going to be kind of fun to, recreate that memory in my mind of like, wow, it's not been that long since we actually met each other, but look at all the things that we've done together since then. So
yeah. That's awesome. It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Go to Hawaii for a conference.
Hawaii is not a bad thing. That's one of the perks of this job for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you explained that you're not naturally a networker, or, you know, it doesn't come as naturally to you. Like you mentioned, not exactly an extrovert, because I
Mhm.
think a lot of students that we have can identify with that. And so I like how you explain that. And it sounds like you gain an awareness of that about yourself,
Yeah.
and knowing that it's really important to do it, even though it might not feel the best to you or very comfortable, but
And so
forcing
that's why I
yourself.
came up with that strategy too, because I was trying to figure out a way to like honor who I am as a person and my comfort level, but also like accomplish what I need to. So just to give myself the ability to say, and sometimes like I might go, okay, I'm going to meet 4 people and then I can leave. And I might get into a conversation and I talk to, it just naturally evolves. And I'm like, no, I'm enjoying this. But if it feels like it's really hard that day, like I've talked to 4 people, I've done what I came to do, I'm gonna try again tomorrow. That's okay. I don't have to force it. And then those conversations end up just being really weird when you're like, hi. Yeah,
Yeah.
just not in that mode. So, and thankfully the person that I actually talked about meeting at that one conference, she is what I would call a connector. And so I have made so many research connections through her, because I'll go to a conference and she's like, "Oh, have you met so and so?" And she does this thing where she like introduces you to the person and then she just like vanishes. Like, where did Hedda go? Like, she was just here. And they're like, she does this all the time. I actually talked to her students about it because I'm like, does she just like introduce people and then she just disappears? They're like, yes, that's what she does. Because she's actually not an extrovert either. So it's like one of her mechanisms to like get out of a conversation. She's like, I'll introduce these 2 people and then I can, but also she recognizes it's a really important part of this career and this field
Yeah.
is making those connections. So it's kind of funny, but it always makes me chuckle when I recognize that she's doing it now. First few times I didn't catch on, but I was like, wait, hold up. She's getting out of this conversation. Smart woman. So,
That's funny. So maybe she's challenged herself, and I can connect. Once I connect 4 people, then I can.
exactly. I can go have a drink in the corner and be fine with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. Be a wallflower. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing. My next question is, knowing what you know now, what do you wish you had known early in your college career? You've
Mm.
probably touched on this a little bit with, um, because you thought you were going into med school, or, the
Yeah.
doctor route.
I mean, I think just even thinking about my route to academia is, oftentimes we're comparing ourselves to people who are quite far in their career. And it's fine to have people that you look up to that you're excited to become like, but also recognize that like they've had all this time and experience before that. And it takes a while to sort of ramp up to that. So even if, like, say when I was a teacher, watching teachers who've been teaching for years, and it's like, wow, they're able to put together this lesson and everything seems so natural. And, you know, I guess not comparing my mom always says, don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides. But so I think it kind of relates to that. Like you see what you see about them, but you don't know the work that went in or the path that they've taken to get there. You're just seeing where they are now or what they want you to see right now. And so not being, being kind to yourself and recognizing that it's great that if you have that goal to get to that point, that's wonderful. But don't be impatient with yourself as you get there because it's going to be a journey. So, yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you. Um, so my last question is it okay if students contact you if they have questions, either
Yeah.
about the work that you do, or about your field?
Yeah.
Anything like that?
So, absolutely, students can definitely contact me. I will just make a clear disclaimer. And I've not gotten to the point where I have this like at the bottom of my email, but I know some people have like an auto reply where it's like, please excuse me if I don't respond. You may have gotten buried in my inbox or something that, to that effect. Like, I can't keep track of my email anymore. It's too much. I have a few colleagues that do that. If you email me and I don't get back to you within a few days, like it probably means it got buried in my inbox. So you can just send another email. You're not harassing me. You're not bothering me. You're just reminding me that I forgot about an email that I was supposed to respond to. And I have a strategy where like if I don't respond to something right away, I leave it marked unread. But like if it gets buried under like 70 emails,
Yeah.
I just don't get to it very fast. So, but yes, definitely students can contact me. It's kind of fun when students are like, I'm interested in your work, or, what you do sounds interesting. It's like, oh, cool. Someone else is, the same like nerdy vibe as me. That's
Right.
exciting. So
That always is nice
yeah,
to share the nerdy
yeah.
vibe. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
That's great. Well, thanks. And in the description of this episode, I'll have your bio and I'll have your email. I'll also include the link to the RAD Lab so they can always
Oh,
go and
that'd be
read
great.
more about it too.
Yeah, and hopefully by the time they get that, it'll be updated because we have been a little bombarded with other tasks, and we're working to make sure that that's all up to date. So,
Yeah.
super.
Continuous process on
Yes,
on
yes,
that.
yes. It's never ending.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experiences and your path. I know it's going to be beneficial to the students that listen to this podcast. You've just shared a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited for them to hear it, and if it strikes some of their fancy, I'm excited to hear from them as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you again for listening to today's episode of the HDFS Career Podcast. I hope you enjoyed meeting Dr. Sarah Douglas and learning about her career journey and all the wonderful things she's done. As I mentioned in the interview, you can find Dr. Douglas's contact information in the episode description. If you have any questions that you want to ask her, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer your questions and talk with you more if you are interested in pursuing a career in early childhood or in special education in some way. Please join me again soon for more interviews with other professionals to learn about the many options you have available to you as you complete your degree. Enjoy the rest of your day.